Well, I'll just say this. It's ridiculous that someone as plain as you is getting married before me. You'd look better in that ragged dress, and even the groom and relatives will tell you so. In front of me, I heard the mad voice of my sister next to the ruined wedding dress. My vision darkened with despair. However, as her older sister, I couldn't leave her to be such an irresponsible adult. I will show her how happy I am and make sure she regrets her behavior. My name is Sophia. At 27, after dating Jacob for 3 years, I recently submitted our marriage registration and our wedding is coming up soon. Preparing wedding invitations, food, and selecting flower decorations has been challenging, but thinking of it as an opportunity to show gratitude to the people who have supported us and our friends who have watched over us gives me motivation. Moreover, I have been particular about the wedding dress I chose. Wearing a wedding dress is a once-in-a-lifetime moment. I've always dreamed of a pure white dress since I was little. I spent quite a bit on the dress, but I wonder if I'll be okay wearing it. I think that wedding dress suits you best, Sophia. Besides, wearing a wedding dress is your dream, right? You've been saving up for it for a long time, haven't you? Thank you, Jacob. Yes, it's a special day, so I'll wear the dress I chose with confidence. That's what I thought. The wedding dress I chose has a lovely design, made with plenty of tulle and lace, created by a renowned designer. Just imagining myself in this dress, standing at the ideal venue with my beloved husband, makes me look forward to the wedding day, and it truly feels like a blissful moment. However, there were some problems in my daily life. Sophia, did you really manage to marry Jacob? Wouldn't Jacob be having regrets? Marlene said. Marlene, you shouldn't say things like that even as a joke, I retorted. When I visited home, my sister Marlene, 2 years younger than me, lounged on the sofa and smirked as she spoke. Even if it's a joke, it's an unforgivable thing to say, but I know better than anyone that Marlene is serious. Jacob is so handsome. He's too good-looking for an ordinary woman like you, right? She continued. You shouldn't judge people by their looks alone. Marriage isn't something you decide based on appearances, I replied. Well, coming from you, that might actually be convincing. I never thought you'd get married before me, Marlene said. Stop it, I yelled. Marlene is always confident, constantly studying makeup and hairstyles to appeal to men, and she's the type who frequently checks herself in the mirror. Ever since we were children, my sister often belittled me in public by saying, "Unlike me, my big sister isn't pretty." It seems she always strives to be on top. Well, apart from appearances, I've never felt inferior to my sister. Our relationship as sisters is far from good, and her recent behavior has been particularly strange. Hey, Sophia, remember when Jacob recently came to our house to greet everyone? I was there too, right? Did Jacob say anything about me? She asked. What do you mean? I replied. Like, wow, you have such a cute sister, or your sister is more refined and beautiful than you, she said. I'm leaving, I said in frustration, and tried to leave our parents' house. As I was about to leave, Marlene muttered something to herself. Acting all high and mighty just because you managed to get married, even though you're still so plain, just you watch. She said. Excuse me? Did you say something? I asked. Just go home already. She snapped back. This attitude of hers wasn't new, and I went home that day without giving it much thought. Strangely enough, on the day Jacob and I were having our pre-wedding photo shoot, Marlene came to the site with our parents to observe. Foon, oh, this is the wedding dress you're going to wear on the big day, she commented. Marlene, the shoot is about to start. Could you move aside, I asked. On the day of the shoot, I was scheduled for a solo photo session first, and while preparations were underway in the cathedral, where the ceremony was to be held, Marlene moved around without regard for others. All right, I'll move. What's the big deal? Just because you're wearing a wedding dress, you're acting like you're the star. More like I actually am the star today since it's my pre-wedding shoot. It'll cause trouble for everyone if we don't proceed quickly. Hanf, You're a typical example of someone who tries to be liked by being considerate because you're just average looking. Just so you know, that dress doesn't suit you at all," Marlene whispered to me, making sure our parents, Jacob and his visiting mother, couldn't hear. What I exclaimed. Just as I was about to argue, Marlene walked away with a smile. The photo session for me began, but Marlene's words stuck with me, making it hard to smile naturally. As the pre-wedding shoot progressed, my smile became increasingly strained. "Are you nervous?" Sophia asked Jacob's mother, my future mother-in-law. We had only met a few times, but she was gentle and very kind. "I'm just having a bit of trouble smiling. Sorry to keep you waiting." "It's okay. Your beautiful appearance in that dress is something to be admired for as long as possible. Take your time with the photos." I felt briefly reassured by my future mother-in-law's kind words, but soon Marlene disrupted the atmosphere again. "Are you planning to trouble your in-laws? I feel sorry for having such an incompetent sister. Who would want someone like you as a daughter-in-law?" Marlene said. "Marlene, please stop," I responded. At that moment, my future mother-in-law stepped between us and said with a smile, "It's so thoughtful of you to accompany your sister for her pre-wedding shoot. But this is for Sophia and my son. Please step back a little." She gently took Marlene by the hand and led her to the corner of the venue. As the shoot continued, Marlene watched me with a stern expression, repeatedly clicking her tongue in displeasure, worsening the atmosphere. "Maybe your sister's feeling lonely, like I stole you away from her." Jacob joked. "I'm really sorry." I apologized. Marlene's presence made the fatigue feel much heavier. But finally, the preparations were complete. There's no such thing as over-preparing for one of the biggest events of your life. I did a final check to make sure everything was ready. As my wedding day approached, Jacob and I traveled together from our new home to the venue, where we proceeded to separate dressing rooms upon arrival. Soon, the moment I had dreamed of would arrive, when I would wear my ideal wedding dress and vow eternal love with the person I cherished. A childhood dream was about to become reality. Filled with a slight nervousness and overwhelming joy, I was about to open the door to the bridal dressing room when, unexpectedly, it swung open from the inside. "Marlene, why are you coming out of there?" To my surprise, it was my sister who emerged from the room. As she closed her bag with a spiteful smirk, she said, "Oops, I mistook it for the toilet. Is the bride's dressing room really this shabby? It's sad you have to get ready in a place like this, but it might be just right for you." With those words, Marlene hurriedly left the scene. Although she was a family member, it was still too early for her to be here. Puzzled by Marlene's strange behavior, I entered the bridal dressing room and was shocked by what I saw. The room, elegantly decorated to provide a calm atmosphere, now held a horrifying sight. There hung my wedding dress, mercilessly slashed and ruined. "What is this?" I exclaimed. The dress, clearly identifiable by its tulle and lace details, was supposed to be mine. As I stood dumbfounded before the ruined dress, the makeup and costume staff entered the room. Seeing me frozen in front of the tattered dress, the staff could not hide their disturbance. When I asked if anyone had been in the room, they told me that my sister had claimed she was setting up a surprise decoration for me and had asked everyone to step out. Could Marlene have cut the dress? Why would she do such a thing? I wondered. While I wanted to deny it, the circumstantial evidence pointed to Marlene being the culprit. My suspicion intensified, especially because of her behavior ever since my engagement was announced and the way she had looked at me with hatred during the pre-wedding shoot. With trembling hands, I took out my smartphone and called Marlene. "What? Do you need something?" Marlene answered the phone immediately. Trying to hold back tears, I asked her clearly, "Marlene, can you tell me what you were doing in my dressing room earlier?" "Huh? Didn't I say I mistook it for the toilet? Have you forgotten already? Are you really that silly?" she replied. "That's definitely a lie. You ruined my wedding dress, didn't you?" I confronted her. As I pressed her with heightened emotions, Marlene laughed and said, "What? Something wrong with the dress? It's awful that you suspect me. Maybe this is divine punishment for your bad personality. It's sick that you seem to enjoy this. It's proof that you did it. Why did you mess up my dress so badly?" I expressed my anger openly. "Ugh, what a hassle." "Do you have any proof that I did it?" Marlene said nonchalantly and continued, "Well, just to say, it's weird that someone as plain as you is getting married before me. You'd look better in that ragged dress, and even the groom and relatives will tell you so," Marlene said, and then she hung up the phone. The dress in front of me was beyond repair. The staff, who had temporarily left the dressing room at my sister's request supposedly for my sake, were constantly apologizing. But no matter how much they apologized, the dress would not return to its original state. I kept telling the staff, "It's okay," but I was really unsure if I could continue with the ceremony. In the midst of this desperate and heavy atmosphere, there was a gentle knock on the door of the bridal dressing room. "Sophia, how is your preparation going?" What is this?" my mother-in-law exclaimed as she entered. She had come to bring some refreshments for the staff. However, as she stepped into the dressing room, which felt more like a funeral than a wedding then, she looked very serious. "Why is the dress so damaged?" "The truth is, my sister." As I began to explain with disappointment, my mother-in-law nodded quietly and said, "I see. But it was good that we prepared a backup, not knowing what might happen." "What do you mean by a backup?" "Sophia, I have a suggestion," said my mother-in-law. Normally calm, my mother-in-law then showed a serious expression and offered me a strategy. "If you support me, I'll give it my all." Thanks to that strategy, I found the resolve to perfect a wedding that I once thought I would have to cancel. Just you watch, Marlene. I will show you how happily I shine, and I will surprise you. Seeing my regained spirits, the staff became even more enthusiastic about decorating. With a new determination different from the emotions I had in the morning, I was ready to face the wedding. From the magnificent chapel set outside the venue, solemn music flowed. As the large doors in front of me opened, there stood my father, with the aisle leading to the altar before us. At the end of the aisle, at the altar, Jacob, my groom, was waiting. As I started walking down the aisle with my father, gasps of surprise rose from the guests. My father was shedding tears as he walked beside me. Meanwhile, Jacob, who was unaware of the situation, seemed surprised. With my veil still on, I sneakily glanced at Jacob's surprised face and also quickly checked the family seats on the bride's side. There I saw Marlene, who had expected me to appear in a tattered or hastily prepared dress, her expression surpassing astonishment. Marlene was so shocked to see me entering the chapel that she stood with her mouth agape, unable to move. I walked past my sister towards Jacob. As I left my father and took Jacob's hand, Marlene started to fidget with the handkerchief she was holding. We exchanged rings, shared our vow kiss, and exited to a shower of flowers. As we walked past Marlene during our exit, the handkerchief she had been pulling at finally tore. This ceremony was not about troubling my sister, but about sharing our joy. I momentarily forgot about my sister and fully savored the joy of the moment. After the group photos outside the chapel were finished, we were directed to head to the reception venue. It's good that it ended smoothly. I was really surprised. You've chosen such a beautiful dress. Before returning to our respective dressing rooms, my husband and I exchanged a few words. Amidst the pleasant atmosphere as guests began heading to the reception venue, Marlene suddenly shouted loudly, "Wait, why are you wearing such a nice dress?" Marlene was pointing at the dress I was wearing. "What's with that long veil and even wearing a tiara? Your chest is also quite shiny. Why are you standing out so confidently when you're supposed to be less noticeable than me? You don't have the right to be so presumptuous." Marlene began shouting as if admiring the dress, but at the same time berating me. She clearly looked frustrated, but the dress I wore was indeed attractive. The dress featured a long veil woven from high-quality lace, and a glamorous tiara decorated with Swarovski crystals. The silk shone beautifully, and the rich volume of the hem resembled a royal wedding. The chest was modestly yet delicately adorned with Swarovski crystals, too. It doesn't matter whether I'm beautiful or not. Every bride has the right to wear a dress she loves and have a wonderful day. You always look down on me, Marlene, but really, who do you think you are? I retorted. Everybody knows that beautiful people are above the ugly. Ugly people have a lower social status. Look, clearly, I'm the one who takes care of herself and looks beautiful, Marlene said as she turned to the guests and smirked maliciously. The guests, including our parents, were all shocked, and none could say anything. Taking their silence as agreement, Marlene gained more momentum. See, I'm definitely more beautiful. Yet I don't have a boyfriend, and my ugly sister gets married first. I can't accept this, she continued. Marlene glared at me fiercely and suddenly lunged at me. Oh, it's pitiful that such an ugly person would wear this. Take it off right now and apologize to the dress. Marlene, wait. This is an important wedding dress borrowed from Jacob's mom. It's what she wore at her wedding, so don't touch it, I screamed. As I tried to stop Marlene, venue staff and Jacob quickly intervened and restrained her. Marlene initially resisted, but quieted down when she heard what I said. Wait, that means it's a second-hand dress? So you were wearing rags after all. Treating something second-hand so preciously, you really are poor. Plus, being given rags by your mother-in-law, you're already being bullied, aren't you? No dreams or hopes at all. Serves you right, she said. I will not allow you to call this dress a rag. In the midst of the guests' merriment, Jacob's mother intervened quietly. She stepped forward with a smile and explained. That dress is a haute couture piece, specially made. It cost $200,000 when it was first made. $200,000, Marlene exclaimed in shock. The price of silk and Swarovski has gone up since then, so it might be even more valuable now. We've had specialists handle its storage, so it's in perfect condition, she continued. Hearing this, Marlene's complexion turned pale. It seemed that specifying the actual price had a significant impact on someone like her. Why would you give such an expensive item to my sister? Marlene stammered. Because Sophia is very kind and will make a wonderful bride, Jacob's mother explained gently. It makes me very happy to think that my precious wedding dress is being worn by my dear daughter-in-law. That's not the point. Why was such an amazing dress prepared in the first place? Marlene pressed on. Marlene had likely assumed there was no backup dress and carried out her plan to ruin the original one. Jacob's mother then smiled slyly at Marlene and said, Marlene, do you remember how harshly you glared at Sophia during the pre-wedding shoot? Even after I pulled you away from her, I noticed you kept looking at that dress on your phone. I suspected you were planning something. I thought you were just a clueless old woman, Marlene muttered. Yes, our family and my husband are wealthy, so we're sensitive to malice from others. Jacob's mother replied smoothly. That comment particularly struck Marlene. What? You are wealthy? So Jacob is rich too? He's rich and handsome, so why did he choose my sister? Marlene screamed in increasing confusion and frustration. Why did I marry Sophia? Actually, I was planning to talk about it in my speech at the reception. Jacob answered shyly to Marlene, who had turned red with inquiry. When I first went out to eat with Sophia, she suggested we split the bill. It was the first time someone had ever suggested that to me, and I was surprised. Plus, she proposed splitting the cost for our new apartment's rent and even the wedding expenses. What? Going Dutch? I don't understand. If Jacob is rich, he should pay for everything. Is he lacking in generosity? Sophia, you should let a man lead and spoil you. That's why you're a flawed woman. Marlene criticized. That's exactly it. Every woman I've dated said the same thing and only saw me as a wallet. But Sophia is truly independent, the first woman I've met like that. I realized I didn't want to be with anyone else but Sophia, Jacob said firmly, adding that there were other reasons too, and he spoke of his love for me. Marlene clicked her tongue and said, "Ugh, I can't listen to this. Boring. I'm not interested in a reception where such a plain sister is the star. Maybe I should just go home." After venting her frustration, Marlene suddenly lost her motivation and relaxed her shoulders. This was her usual pattern. She either creates a scene until she gets her way or until she gets bored. I have always endured her as her sister, but it is a real problem that her personality has not improved even as she grew up. Looks like I have to give her one last lesson as her sister, I thought, while grabbing Marlene's arm to hold her back as she yawned. This is a good opportunity to tell you. You will have to pay for the dress you ruined. Marlene grimaced in displeasure and then laughed triumphantly. Me? Ruined the dress? There's no proof of that. Why don't you save your sleep talking for bedtime? With that, Marlene shrugged off my hand and chuckled. It seemed she was happy she managed to ruin the dress I had chosen. However, I must teach her what happens to people who trample on the happiness of others. As Marlene looked pleased, I smiled calmly and nodded. Unfortunately for you, everything was recorded on the surveillance cameras. I had them installed in the bridal dressing room. I'm even considering filing a criminal complaint for property damage. I hate to have a criminal in the family at a wedding. What? There's such an option at weddings. Marlene's laughter disappeared, and her face twisted again with surprise and panic. Before her, I continued to explain calmly. It's not an option. I had it installed just for my wedding day and will have it removed tomorrow. How can you just install and remove things on your own? That's ridiculous. This venue is the wedding venue that I run. What? You are the owner? I thought you were just a plain office worker. Whether I'm plain or not, it's true that I was an office worker until recently. However, my passion for wedding dresses and weddings grew stronger each day, and I decided to establish my own ideal wedding venue. It wasn't only due to my savings, but Jacob's mother, who is also an investor, supported me, allowing me to pursue my dream and manage a wedding venue designed for brides. This place is the venue you manage? Absolutely not. I've never heard such a thing from Mom or Dad. I had asked them to keep my entrepreneurship a secret from you. I thought you would say it's presumptuous of me to run a company, given my ugly appearance. Marlene's face, filled with anger and confusion, gradually softened as she listened to my story. I could tell exactly what arguments were taking place in her mind. So, you're saying I have lots of wealthy relatives? Then you can introduce me to a wealthy man, right? Yay, Marlene rejoiced. In the end, she hadn't thought of anything good. Marlene, do you think we can continue our relationship as sisters? You tore up a dress I was attached to. I never want to see your face again. Why are you saying that? It was just a little prank. I said I'm sorry, didn't I? Marlene's apology was superficial, not heartfelt, and she still acted nonchalantly. That recklessness brought my anger to its limit. What do you mean? Just a little prank? I will never forgive you. It's good I'm wearing this beautiful dress from Jacob's mom right now, but the dress you ruined was also precious. I will definitely seek compensation. What? You're really planning to seek compensation? How much does a wedding dress even cost? I don't have any real savings. If you don't pay, I'll report it to the police. Did you think that bullying your ugly, plain sister from childhood means you can do anything and be forgiven? That's no joke. Grow up already. Faced with my fierce response, Marlene collapsed, powerless. Seeing our parents crying, shedding different tears from those at the ceremony, I realized how selfish Marlene was and how much she had saddened them. Sophia is truly splendid. She's the exact kind of entrepreneur I had chosen. I was fortunate to have her wear the dress and to have invested in her company. Mom, that's my line. Please don't say it before I do. Watching Jacob and his mother converse leisurely, I smiled, relieved. After sending a disheartened Marlene back home, the newly started reception proceeded warmly. Despite significant troubles, it was the best wedding for me as I was able to build trust with the family I was joining. After the wedding, Marlene was expelled by our enraged parents. They apologized to me for being too lenient with my sister and strongly condemned Marlene's actions. Though Marlene left home, she couldn't change her job to pay for the dress she ruined, so she rented a small apartment near our parents' house. However, staying local meant she inevitably ran into old friends. Since my sister and I are close in age, the incidents at my wedding quickly became the talk of the town. Every time Marlene tried to engage with her friends, she was noticeably avoided, which disgusted her enough to make her flee out of state. The commute to work took up a significant amount of time, and her scant savings were depleted by the move. Marlene now uses her monthly salary and bonuses to compensate for the dress, leading to a financially strained life. She can no longer afford to spend on makeup or fashion. Once a confident trendsetter at her workplace, she now silently gets through her days in disheveled clothes, occasionally casting envious glances at her colleagues. Her only pleasure is on social media, where her posts, full of despair, increasingly alienate people. Meanwhile, Jacob and I continue to enjoy a happy marriage. Jacob is engrossed in his original job, and I have started creating unique wedding dresses at the venue, as suggested by my mother-in-law. Encouraged by investors who believe that if you love wedding dresses, you can definitely create ones that brides will adore, I am working with my staff on this unfamiliar task. Though it's challenging, there's an irreplaceable joy in crafting the ideal dress using beautiful tulle, lace, and silk. Remembering the dress Marlene ruined still pains me, but looking at the photos of me and my mother-in-law's wonderful dress, where Jacob and I vowed our eternal love, helps me heal little by little. Most of all, being present at the moment a bride I've dressed celebrates the best day of her life has allowed me to find new joy in weddings. I am grateful every day to Jacob for marrying me and to my mother-in-law who supported me at work and when my dress was destroyed. And, oddly enough, I am a bit thankful to my sister for reaffirming my love for wedding dresses. The relationship with my family became even more tenuous after I moved out and they saw the house I had bought. They resorted to legal measures, demanding that the house be given to my sister. They lost the lawsuit and were burdened with a debt of $120,000. I have been dwelling on this issue for a long time, questioning whether I need advice. I may just want to express my feelings, but I have always felt unloved within my family. I have a sister, Margaret, who is 5 years younger than me, but we have never gotten along. Her birth seemed to make everything worse. Since childhood, I felt that my parents saw her as the center of their world. She was the golden child, and I was treated as just another person around. I might be overreacting, but looking back, it becomes clear that everything was off. Take last Christmas, for example. Margaret received a brand new PS5 fully set up, something I had wanted. All I had was a pair of plain white socks I bought at Walmart. It's not about the socks themselves, but they were the only gift I had under the Christmas tree. While the family gathered and smiles were all around, Margaret was picking gifts like a little animal scavenging for toys. During this time, the whole house was abuzz for her. In my hands, there was a modestly wrapped package. I sat there in new socks, forcing a smile, completely ignored by everyone around. Unbelievably, this wasn't an exceptional occurrence. My life has always followed this pattern. My family doesn't even remember my birthday. The last time they celebrated it was when I was 10. Since then, it's been forgotten, and last year I quietly celebrated with college friends with not a single congratulatory word, call, or email from my parents. On the other hand, Margaret's birthdays are always a big deal. Last year for her 16th, my parents threw a lavish party. Family and friends were all invited, and amazingly, a trampoline was set up, with entertainers and magicians called in. The house was filled with decorations, and everything was catered professionally. It was like a festival. However, I wasn't even invited to her birthday party, and I didn't know this fact until the day before. When I asked my parents, they explicitly stated they did not want me to participate. To be honest, I was overwhelmed with my studies at the time. That day, I just went out with friends, focusing on distracting myself from the situation. Still, even when sharing time with my family, I felt as if I wasn't really part of the household, and I couldn't shake off the loneliness. But as my own birthday approached this year, a faint hope emerged that maybe something might change. I had given up on expecting much, but I thought maybe they would acknowledge my existence. However, there was no change. The day to spend with my college friends came again. They organized a small but fun party in the dorm. It was a good time, but it was different from being with family. A birthday, even a small one, should be celebrated with family. Margaret's birthdays always made me acutely aware of what I was missing. I remember when she turned 10, my parents decorated the entire house with pirate adventure themes. For my own 10th birthday, I was just thankful to have pizza. The pain isn't just from having fewer presents or parties, it's from feeling unattractive and that this will always be the case. I always kept up good grades, stayed out of trouble, and tried to do what was asked of me, but I realized that it wasn't important. Margaret was always a person who drew others to her. She was sociable and good at sports, possessing qualities completely different from mine, and my parents were very happy when she was born. I remember the excitement when Margaret was born. I imagined we would become best friends, playing video games and getting along like in the movies. But it quickly became clear that Margaret had little interest in me. She enjoyed sports with her friends and always drew attention. I felt as if I were being forgotten entirely. As I grew older, I began to harbor resentment towards her. Initially, I told myself that it wasn't her fault, but she was beginning to understand the extent of her influence. My parents never blamed her for anything. I was always the one blamed. Even when she made mistakes, my parents would just laugh it off. When Margaret broke the TV, she blamed it on me. Her friends were over, and somehow the TV fell off its stand, nearly breaking completely. When my parents came back, Margaret pointed at me and accused me of causing it. I wasn't even home at the time, but my parents believed her, and I was grounded for a month and had my phone taken away. I was treated like a criminal. After that, I withdrew into my own world, spending most of my time in my room or at friends' houses. I desperately wanted to leave home, but every return reminded me of how worthless I felt. My room was a small, suffocating space, in stark contrast to Margaret's room, which brimmed with the latest electronics and posters of her favorite sports teams. She seemed to have her own little empire, and I felt like an invisible shadow. My 18th birthday was unforgettable. I had a slight hope that it might mark a new start as an adult, but I was let down. That morning started like any other. My mother was busy in the kitchen, my father was engrossed in the newspaper, and Margaret was absorbed in her new Xbox. There were no congratulations, no presents, not even a word to acknowledge my birthday. I felt completely ignored in this house. At that moment, I realized nothing would change. Only Margaret was treated specially. She had taken all the love and attention from me and from our parents. I don't know if she was aware of this fact, but she didn't make it an issue. By her actions, I grew to hate her more. I took the necessary measures. That is, I distanced myself from my parents and arranged my life so I didn't have to witness my sister Margaret's blatant favoritism. Being neglected by my family was draining me internally. Because of this, I chose to avoid contact with them. I moved out as soon as possible and started living with university friends. Honestly, there was a sense of relief, like being freed, but I had to make a living. I began freelancing using my talent in graphic design. At first, it was simply to support myself, but gradually, I got more work, received higher evaluations, and became involved in larger projects. I worked tirelessly, late into the nights and over the weekends. I was determined to build my success independently of my family ties. Then, at the age of 24, a wonderful opportunity came my way. It was meeting a person named Todd. He had all the qualities I was looking for and was the ideal partner. He was intelligent, ambitious, and had a generous heart. He was also freelancing, specifically managing social media for small and medium businesses. We hit it off right away and started collaborating on various projects. We supported each other and grew in our respective fields. In fact, he was the first person who made me feel like I wasn't just part of the background. He truly understood me, and he loved me not for what I could do for him, but for who I was. His care was not out of obligation, but from genuine feelings. As our careers stabilized, we began to dream bigger futures together. After dating for a year, we moved in together. Things progressed smoothly. We made a bold plan to dip into our savings and buy a home. We were not looking for just an ordinary house, but something special. After a long search, we found a sprawling 3-story house in the suburbs. It was more expensive than we expected, but we managed to pay for it with our combined income. We were very happy. It was truly our dream. It was a result of our joint efforts. We signed the contract and became the official owners 3 days later. The real trouble began 3 days after we moved in. I got a call from my family. At first, I didn't even feel like answering. Since moving out, we had barely spoken, and I had avoided conversations because they were awkward, but the calls kept coming persistently, so I finally answered. And for some reason they said, "We've arrived in town and want to stop by your new home." I was conflicted but agreed to their visit. I should have been more discerning. I thought it best to just get the visit over with rather than avoiding them indefinitely. And a few hours later, my parents and Margaret, along with a man I had never met before, appeared at our new home's entrance. From here, things got even stranger. Margaret had many favorites. The man she brought was her fiancé, Isaac, and Margaret was pregnant. Yes, Margaret was soon to be a mother. Not a single person had told me that my sister was engaged, let alone the fact that she was expecting a child. That was a wake-up call for me. Before even entering the house, my father started making passive-aggressive comments. "Oh, so this is the house you bought. I didn't think you could afford something like this." He said it in a way that seemed to look down on me. But I didn't let it bother me. I wasn't in the mood to argue. When they entered the house, the atmosphere became even more awkward. My mother tried to talk to Todd, but he sensed something was off, glanced at me, and asked what was going on here. At that moment, my father and Margaret were whispering, and Isaac was acting as if the house belonged to him. Then suddenly, my father made an unexpected statement and began to speak decisively. "I think it makes sense for Margaret and Isaac to move in here to build their family and make space for the baby," he stated arrogantly. I was so stunned by his words that I could only stare. "This place is too large for you and Todd." My father continued, ignoring how upset I was. "Margaret and Isaac really need a large place like this to raise a child. You two don't need all this space." I couldn't believe my ears. My father looked me straight in the eye, and what he said next made me feel indignant. "This is no joke. It's time for you to step aside. You should give up what your sister needs. The family should come first, and she is starting a new family. You and Todd can find a smaller place. This house is more suitable for them." I was devastated. Years of resentment suddenly overflowed. This home is Todd's and mine. We bought this house, and it's in our names. No one else gets to make decisions for us. Margaret then interjected with a smug look. "Wait a minute. I can't see why you need such a large place. Unlike you, we have a child. That's not the issue." I exploded with anger. "The problem is that you're claiming what's mine as your own and trying to take it away. I've lived a repressed life for too long. I can't take it anymore." At that moment, my father became very aggressive. He stood up, puffed out his chest, and berated me high-handedly. "You should be grateful," he said. "It's shameful to live in a house that's beyond your means. If you give it to Margaret, she won't have to feel that way, will she? Besides, they aren't demanding the keys, they're just asking. Whether you like it or not, this house becoming Margaret's is inevitable," he added. At that point, my anger finally erupted. Unable to grasp what was happening, I lunged at my father and pinned him against the wall. "Get out of this house right now," I shouted. Todd tried to calm us down, but I couldn't stop. Years of anger erupted all at once. My father pushed back, and without realizing it, we were fighting and yelling at each other. My mother and Margaret were screaming, and Isaac was frantically making a phone call in the corner. The fight didn't stop until the police arrived. It must have been Isaac who called the police. The situation spiraled out of control, and they separated us, handcuffed my father and me, and took us to the police car. I never thought it would come to this. I never expected my father would try to take the house from me, and as a result, I ended up in jail. Hours later, Todd paid my bail, but the damage was already severe. My family was irreparably broken, but it wasn't over yet. Things got even worse. My father cunningly decided to sue me over the house, arguing that Margaret and Isaac needed it more than I did, demanding that I hand it over, and actually took the matter to court. I couldn't hide my shock at his audacious actions. Thus, we went to court. I hired a lawyer and gathered all documents proving the house was registered in my name, preparing for the most crucial battle of my life. However, I had something hidden. There were traces of mental and psychological abuse I had suffered over the years, and I intended to reveal them. I collected evidence. Emails, text messages, and even witnesses, including friends who had observed my parents' behavior towards me over the years, were gathered to testify. We brought all this to court. My lawyer emphasized not only that the house belonged to me, but also that I was a victim of neglect and psychological abuse in the past. The trial lasted several months, and my father used various tactics to demean me. He portrayed himself as a loving father who was doing his best for the family. Margaret and Isaac played the victims, pleading that they needed the house for their baby and condemning me for not giving it up as selfish, but they were not successful. When the verdict was finally announced, I felt relieved of a huge burden. The court ruled in my favor and further ordered my father to pay $120,000 in damages for the mental and psychological abuse. For the first time in my life, I felt that justice was served as someone stood up for my rights. Following the judgment, I decided to completely cut off contact with my parents and Margaret. I could no longer endure manipulation, falsehoods, and unfair favoritism. Together with Todd, we finally made the house truly ours and began building a new life, though the scars from the past had not fully healed. Even now, as I write this, it's unbelievable to think how much my parents tried to deceive me, but that was the reality. Margaret had once been the favored youngest child, but that situation has changed. It has been about 3 years since then. Before continuing this story, let me tell you about our wedding, which took place 3 years ago. It was the happiest day of my life and the best decision I've ever made. Having overcome complex family issues, Todd remained my steadfast support. After the court battle with my father, it was confirmed that Todd was the only person I could truly trust. We had a small, intimate ceremony with just Todd's close friends and relatives, without inviting my parents, sister, or any other family members. The manipulation, abuse, and subsequent litigation they had subjected me to were incomprehensible. I didn't want their toxic behavior to ruin my wedding day, as I had fully realized their true nature. However, a few days after the wedding, I received a long guilt-inducing email from my mother, expressing how hurt she was for not being invited. How she found out remains unclear. My father did not attempt to contact me, which was fine by me, but Margaret seemed to have lost her self-control. This was predictable. Margaret had always been the golden child, constantly striving to please our parents. She never accepted responsibility for her life, always shifting blame for her mistakes onto others. Although the court's favorable decision and the ordered payment of $120,000 to me affected my parents' finances, it did not bankrupt them, but their financial flexibility was significantly reduced. Spoiled throughout her life, Margaret could not handle this new reality. She believed she had a right to inherit the house my father owned, but she could not make that a reality. Her demands for a large sum of money were just the beginning of her disappointments. Her fiancé, Isaac, left her a few months after the trial. Reportedly, Margaret had a miscarriage due to mental stress. It all felt like my fault. The sequence of events, my father losing the lawsuit, facing financial difficulties, and Isaac leaving Margaret, seemed to be blamed on me. Then, the situation completely changed. A month into our marriage, as Todd and I were adjusting to our new life, we enjoyed the peace of being free from family toxicity. One day we decided to take a walk in our neighborhood. As we strolled down the quiet streets, we breathed in the fresh air, refreshing our spirits. It was supposed to be a normal day. We had walked about half a block when we encountered Margaret. She was standing on the corner, staring intently at me. Her eyes were filled with anger. My heart froze in an instant. I hadn't seen her since the trial, and I couldn't understand why she would suddenly appear near me. Confused, I yelled, "What are you doing here?" Before I could grasp the situation, she charged at me. In her hand was an iron rod, apparently taken from a construction site. I tried to retreat, screaming, but she was too fast. She swung the rod and hit my abdomen before I could react. Pain shot through me instantly, sharp as if my ribs were engulfed in flames. I bent over, gasping for breath, but Margaret's attack was not over yet. She swung the rod down again, this time aiming at my feet. The rod struck my left shin with a sickening sound, and I collapsed weakly onto the sidewalk. "You ruined my life." Margaret continued to shout, trembling with anger. "It's all your fault. You caused our father's financial collapse. It's your fault Isaac left. Everything broke because of you." I managed to stand and tried to defend myself, but my body wouldn't move properly. I'm not sure how much time passed, but gradually I heard voices growing louder in the distance. There were shouts from people around and footsteps rushing towards me. I saw someone grab Margaret and pull her away, but my consciousness was fading and I couldn't grasp what was happening. When I regained consciousness, I was in a hospital bed. Todd was sitting beside me, his face pale and his eyes red with tears. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and my body screamed in pain. "Are you okay?" Todd whispered as he gripped my hand tightly. "I'm okay." But I was far from okay. I had multiple broken ribs, a fractured left leg, and a broken right arm. The doctor told me it was fortunate that I had survived. If it hadn't been for the bystanders who intervened, Margaret might have killed me. I had to call the police to stop her. Margaret was arrested at the scene and handcuffed while I lay bleeding on the sidewalk. Afterwards, my consciousness faded and I remained in a dazed state. Under the influence of pain medication, my body slowly began to recover, and during that time, Todd stayed by my side constantly. He managed everything, including the police reports, insurance paperwork, and hiring a lawyer in preparation for the upcoming trial. A trial was scheduled because Margaret faced serious charges for assault with a weapon, and given the severity of my injuries, she was looking at a long-term sentence. Once I was conscious and could understand the situation, Todd explained everything to me. After being abandoned by Isaac, Margaret had a mental breakdown. She fell into severe depression and, according to the police report, refused to acknowledge her own failings, instead shifting all the blame onto me. Margaret, who had waited outside my house for hours and brought an iron rod from a nearby construction site to attack me, told the police she did not regret her actions. When questioned by the police, she justified her behavior by claiming that I had destroyed her life and was merely seeking justice. She truly believed that I was the cause of all the problems she faced, including her fiancé leaving her and her father's financial troubles. I spent a long time in the hospital recovering from my fractures, and every day was painful. The ongoing physical therapy, relentless medical examinations, and the looming pressure of the trial weighed heavily on me. I couldn't walk for an extended period, and even after being discharged from the hospital, I needed crutches and arm support for a while. The doctors warned me that it could take months to fully recover, and there was a possibility that I might not completely regain my prior level of function. Months of treatment and recovery later, the trial against Margaret began. Margaret pleaded not guilty, holding on to the misguided belief that her actions were absolutely justified. She felt that I was to blame for the situation that had influenced her actions. Her defense argued that she acted out of mental distress and that a series of familial events had destabilized her mental state. However, the evidence presented in court strongly suggested her guilt. Eyewitnesses to the incident had seen Margaret's attack on me and had immediately called the police. The prosecution submitted detailed medical reports of my injuries and police reports that included evidence of Margaret's premeditated attack. It was clear she had come to my home with the intent to harm me. Sitting in court and watching my sister try to justify her actions against me was more heart-wrenching than any hardship I had previously endured. Throughout the trial, she never once looked in my direction. To her, it was as if I no longer existed. But perhaps the most gut-wrenching moment was seeing my parents not only appear in court, but sit by Margaret, listening and nodding as if in agreement every time she claimed I had destroyed her life. Their nodding was like a knife twisting in my chest. Despite such betrayal, they still chose her side. They seemed to firmly believe she was the victim. Their support for her remained unchanged. The trial lasted several weeks, but the verdict was almost predetermined from the start. From the courtroom atmosphere and testimonies, the outcome was anticipated. Margaret was convicted of serious assault charges and was ultimately sentenced to 5 years in prison. She would be eligible for parole in 3 years, following the legal process, but honestly, that fact no longer mattered to me. I had accepted the reality of being without a family. Through this ordeal, it became clear that those who were supposed to be my family were not true family at all. But at least, throughout everything, Todd has been an invaluable presence, steadfastly supporting me. He faced every difficult situation unflinchingly, always standing with me and providing strong support. We are focused on moving forward positively. I am gradually recovering, both physically and mentally, and I'm starting to see a brighter future ahead, little by little. I continue to receive therapy consistently to overcome the trauma of past events, but it's a slow and lengthy process. There are days when I feel better than the previous day and can genuinely appreciate my progress, but there are also challenging days when it's hard to face myself. The reflection in the mirror feels starkly different from who I once was. I cannot predict what the future holds, but I've resolved to cherish each day as it comes. And now, at least, I have a clear understanding of who I can truly trust.